This is what I'm thinking of as a social history of early modern philosophy over the last 30 years or so. It may be better called a sociable history of philosophy. And by the way, I'm delighted to see so many people here again. This is what, the 18th? No.
17th.
The 17th year of the seminar. We only missed, I think, 1 year. And I think that this seminar is a perfect illustration of the kind of thing that I'm going to talk about. And these are largely personal reminiscences, but also sort of a larger history of how it is that this community, not only this community, but the larger community in history of early modern philosophy came to have its particular character over the last 30 years or so. I think that, well, certainly people I know in other areas of the history of philosophy and even the history of science have commented on how cordial things are in our area, and how unlike many other areas in academics more generally, but also in particular in philosophy, people like to be with one another, people are cordial with one another, people actually enjoy conferences, lectures, and so on. And this is something that developed, I think, in the course of the last 30 years, and something that I want to talk about a little bit. And there are two institutions that I want to talk about that sort of converge on, on this institution that we're now participating. One of them is something that you may have heard about, called the Midwest Seminar in Early Modern Philosophy. And I think virtually all of you should be on the list. If you're not, let me know. There's a mailing list that I have with, at this point, I think probably 300 or 400 people on it who receive information about events in early modern philosophy and related in one way or another to early modern philosophy. That is called the Midwest Seminar list. And people may be a little bit puzzled about where it is that the name came from. There really was a Midwest Seminar. It started, the first meeting, so far as I can see, I went back, I spent actually time in the archives researching this. Which is to say, looking in my computer for whatever it is that I could find. And the best that I could find is that the first meeting of the Midwest Seminar was, and there was a Midwest Seminar, in 1989 in the spring in Chicago. And the way in which it began was actually a year earlier in Madison, Wisconsin. Steve Nadler had a conference on early modern causality. A volume came out on that people still refer to from time to time, talking about things like occasionalism through the 17th century. But everybody had such a good time there that he and I decided that what we're going to do is try to have conferences like that on a more regular basis. But instead of having each one be a theme, what we decided to do was have a sort of local conference in which people could drive up on Saturday morning. There would be talks on Saturday afternoon, a dinner, which is always essential, and then talks on Sunday morning, and people could then drive back on Sunday afternoon. Wouldn't be very expensive. In fact, we had, I think, virtually no subsidy. I think I may have bought potato chips and Steve may have bought the wine for the first for the first one. And we had the first one at Chicago. The idea was to have a variety of people, some younger people, some older people, variety of different topics, We made sure to have a mixture of also men and women. And the idea was that you would come, whoever was speaking, whatever it is that people were speaking about, whether you were on the program or not, because it was going to be local, because it was going to be just an event for people to get together and talk about whatever work it is that they were doing, and to begin to establish a community. Well, it was, at that time, by the way, some of you may remember, there was a time before the internet, and in fact before computers, when what we had to do, that I think was at the beginning. Many people did have computers, but I don't think, I think I may not have had a computer.
1992.
1992 was when I got it.
I'm the archives.
But we actually would make up a printed, not a printed, well, a Xerox call for papers. I developed a mailing list, mainly of universities in the Midwest, as well as people I knew from other places who might be interested. We actually put labels on the papers, put stamps on them, and mailed them to people. And then later, when the program was established, we would mail the program out to as many people as we could. And we were very gratified. We got, in the first years, we got, audiences of 25, 30 people who would come. We established a relationship with a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. This was very, very important. I actually had the cell phone number of the manager so that we could communicate about the menu. And people would come. We just told them. After a while, we gave them how much we could afford, and they put out a marvelous banquet, and everybody had a wonderful time. But pretty quickly, it began to grow. And first of all, we got responses from people, not just in the Midwest, but also on both coasts, who wanted to fly in for this and give papers. And then we got responses from people in Europe that they wanted to come over for it as well. The first ones were held in places like Chicago, which was probably most often, Madison, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Lafayette, Toronto, East Lansing, which is Michigan State. But then after a while, first of all, the Midwest Seminar began to meet in places like Paris and Lecce with the Centro di Studi Cartesiani and the Centre d'études cartésiennes in Paris. And they began coming regularly to Chicago for the Midwest Seminar meetings. And then by the mid-90s, various other similar societies began to be established. And there was one in the southeast, there was one in the mountain region, somewhere around Colorado, in the west coast, in the northeast, then in Oxford. The most exotic one was the famous Arctic Circle. You were at the Arctic Circle.
I was at the Arctic Circle Seminar in Arimona.
That was actually a remarkable event. They got there, and then there was a volcanic eruption, and they couldn't leave.
So we toured the whole Finland by bus, and then we had to
Attempting
take
to
the
get out.
ferry to other places in Europe. Yes, that was very.
Yeah, that was the only way
It took
they
about
could
2 weeks
leave,
to
because the airplanes were not running. And as the idea spread, actually became more elaborate, and it would go for 2 days, 2 full days, and they couldn't all fit in the Chinese restaurant anymore. And it became, I think, a way of people in early modern philosophy to come together. It wasn't any more regional. Each of them, I think, became sort of almost a national thing or an international thing. And I think it turned out to be an extremely good way to socialize people, to get people to talk from a variety of different communities to be talking to one another on a regular basis. So that's the Midwest Seminar and what it is that happened from the Midwest Seminar. And then there's this seminar. Meanwhile in Romania, in 2001, I got a very curious invitation from people I didn't know, from a country that I had never been to. I'd been very curious about. I had never been there. And it was from Dana and from Vlad Alexandrescu, who unfortunately can't be with us because where is he now?
In Bahrain, trying to save Roșia Montana. Listed as a UNESCO patrimony.
And who else were the organizers for that one?
For that one, it was just Vlad and me.
That's what I thought. And you were at that time in the New York College, weren't you?
I was nowhere, but no one was actually. No, Vlad was at the university, I was jobless. We got a big grant from Soros, by the way, Central European University, to organize a summer school.
Right.
And we were thinking where to organize it and with whom to organize it, and we kind of invited Professor Garber to talk about Descartes' metaphysical physics. An offer you couldn't resist.
Exactly. No, I thought it was very, very exotic. I had never been there. I was very curious. I figured, why not? And so I actually had a bunch of, at that point, Chicago didn't begin the term until the beginning of October. So I had a month in which I could do various things, and I had a number of things planned later on in Europe. So I came over for that. It was an experience, the first one. The first one was located in Tuscany, in the villa that had belonged originally to the summer home of George Enescu, the composer. Getting there was, for me, a remarkable experience. It was a 2-lane road, and all you saw on the 2-lane road were, first of all, enormous trucks that were going very, very slowly because they couldn't go any faster, and putting up enormous amounts of smoke. Dashas from the not the new dashas, which are really quite nice, but the ones that were sort of falling apart and held together with chewing gum, as I was told by various people who were driving them, and horse carts that were probably almost as frequent as dashas on the highway. Not sort of old-fashioned horse carts, but first of all, of course, there was a horse, and there was a wooden cart, but it had wheels that looked like they came from a small truck. They were not anything that I had ever seen before, and so it took forever to get to Masha. Once you got there, to Tuscany. Masha was later. It took forever to get to Tuscany. Once you got there, of course, there was the villa, which was quite nice, and but the village itself was, I don't think that they had any paved streets. They certainly didn't have any hotels, restaurants, or shops. on Saturday morning, there was a fair at which, of course, everybody came in their horse carts. The parking lot was filled with horse carts, and out on the grass were spread things like blue jeans and sneakers and CD-ROMs and or CDs and goats and chickens and a cow. And I almost bought a cow because it was such an attractive proposition at that time. And I didn't have a cow, so. But it was really something that I had never seen before. And I found it exotic and charming. The actual concept of the summer school was, I think, largely directed at undergraduates, and sort of bringing them into philosophy in some way or another. Of course, Donna and Vlad were there. Kadra Avramescu was there, and I can't remember a lot of the other people. But the visitors there, Michel Blay was there, I was there, Denis Commissioner was there. Can you remember any of the other?
Catherine Brady.
Catherine Brady, of course, that's right. She was the one with whom I almost bought the cow.
And I think Migna was there.
Were you there?
Yeah, I was there.
Migna was there and Sorana was there. They were students at the
Right,
time.
Sorana was there. And a bunch of younger people. There were some seminars that were, I think, for more advanced people. But it was largely directed at undergraduates, to bring them sort of into studying philosophy. And it was a success, I think. And after the sessions were over, those of us who were on the staff got together and talked about what had worked and what had not worked, and decided to try doing it again. And we did it again the following summer with a somewhat different cast of characters and in a different place. That's when it is that we went to Matcha, I think, where we were, which is outside of Arad, and sort of tumble down 18th century castle, or chateau, really. That wasn't really quite renovated. There were parts of it that we were not allowed to be in because they weren't safe. And this was more directed at sort of more advanced people. That was the first year that Roger Ariev, who has been a sometime participant in this, but actually quite often. Frederic de Bouzon, Vincent Caro was there for 1 year. It was more scholarly, less educational. And that's where, among other things, we developed various traditions began, including evenings. I don't think we had palinka then, because we were in a different region, but of getting together after dinner and with singing and talking and drinking wine and things of that sort. But it was a great success. We were there for 2 summers. The third summer, this was 2004, we moved to Arad. And that, I think, may have been the summer when Julia Belgioso and the crew from Lecce came.
And Paul Lodge from Oxford.
And Paul Lodge from Oxford. And they were there for at least 2 summers, I think.
Yeah.
And Igor has been back.
Igor has been back a couple of times.
Has been back a few times, but the rest of them not. We then went, the first time in Bran was 2005. So that was already 13 years ago. And with the exception of a year in Mallinckrodt in 2008, and a year in Alba Iulia, which was 2016, we've been here actually in these villas since 2005. Mallinckrodt in 2008 was a little village, a little Saxon village in Transylvania that was part of what the Prince Charles Trust.
Mihailnescu Trust.
Yeah, and what they were trying to do was turn it into a sort of tourist spot and helping the local people to sort of rearrange their houses, learn how to do basically hotel sorts of things. And we were sort of the models for them to practice on, which was just fine with us. And but it was a very charming Saxon village where people still spoke German of an 18th century kind, and where there was a marvelous Lutheran church that was originally a Catholic church from about 13th or 14th century, something like that. And that was a really memorable summer. I wasn't in Alba Iulia, but that was. Did you want to say something about?
Well, that was another memorable summer because the whole thing took place within the Vacianeum Library, which is an 18th century library, closed to the public, closed ever since, open for us. And we had seminars around these fantastic books, and we were able to handle the books and take pictures of the books and discuss on these books that basically very few people have ever touched since 1783 when they were assembled by the local bishop of Garber. And therefore it was a different seminar. We were 36 or something, it was much larger. We had parallel sessions according to which books people wanted to consult. So it was more like a conference than a regular gathering.
But over the years, I think we've evolved a number of traditions. Both the Midwest Seminar and this group have, I think, evolved, enormously. There is no longer a Midwest Seminar in the Midwest, but there are comparable things, I think, all over the world now that have evolved in very interesting ways. And in a certain way, this is a continuation of that tradition, as well as a continuation of the tradition that began in 2001 at this time. And the traditions that have evolved, including, first of all, it is now more directed at graduate students, young scholars, senior scholars, than it was originally. The tradition of doing a certain number of sort of open reading groups where we do reading in common, and then discussion together. As well as the opportunity of doing work in progress. We did have a number of themes. My favorite theme was the year that we did Losers of the Scientific Revolution, which was intended as a joke. But a number of people actually took it seriously and actually wrote papers or presented papers on exactly that. But the themes in general were broad enough so that people could do basically whatever it is that they wanted, except for one summer when we read together Spinoza's Tractatus Theologico Politicus, and we had a number of people who specialized in that. Who came. But people in general didn't pay much attention to the themes that we announced when we were talking about even in the reading groups. I think people did basically whatever it is that they wanted, which I think is just fine, because it gives people basically the same as in the Midwest Seminar, an opportunity to come together but more intensively here, and get to know one another and develop a community. Another tradition that was developed was the cooperative dinner, which we would have on one night when we would all go out and gather things in the marketplace in town, at the supermarket, come together and cook a dinner together here, which was usually enough food for 2 or 3 nights. And that worked, I think, quite well. I think that was a wonderful tradition. Then there was the palinka on the terrace, which we probably won't begin tonight, in part because of the rain, but also in part because we haven't gotten any palinka yet. There is wonderful palinka that you can get in the marketplace. The one exception to that was the night that Igor Augustini, who is a great fan of the mint julep, actually made mint juleps for everybody, getting mint from the stream down below, and he brought a number of bottles of bourbon and made mint juleps. The big problem actually in Bran was finding ice, where because you can't buy ice, I think, very many places. And then finally, singing classic French popular music. Donna has a marvelous voice and knows the words to virtually all of the songs in popular French music from the 40s and 50s, and I'm sure that we will continue that after the palinka, of course. But,
I'm happy to help out on that level.
excellent.
I'm passing the torch. This was 10 years ago.
No, it was more recently than that, I think. After a couple of glasses of wine.
Words are coming back, huh?
The words will
The
come back,
voice.
but I think that now with the internet, it's really easy to pull up the words. But that's about it. I think that all of these institutions have contributed enormously to sociability, within this group, as well as I think to the quality of scholarship, which over the last 30 years has really become, higher and higher. And look around you. You will see these people for the next 30 years at various things like this, at various conferences, and I think that it's a marvelous thing, the way in which the community has evolved and grown. But that's all remarks. Donna, do you want to add anything about the?
Well, let me think. I mean, you have covered a lot of ground here. On the how the community grew, I think we can perhaps. I didn't prepare that, but I can think back to the times when some of the people who are now professors here and there, like Catherine Brading, for example, was a graduate, unemployed graduate in 2001. Or examples like this of people who have made amazing careers, and we were always proud that at some point they were, and they remember fondly being around at Bran or Marshall and Kraut and so on. And they spread the word that this is a good place to be in the summer. And I remember once Eric Lewis wrote a paper in Early Science and Medicine or Perspective in Science or something like this, which acknowledged the Bran seminar, the Princeton-Bucharest Seminar, as the place to be during the summer, which was fantastic. So we have printed evidence that people had a good time.
Well, I think that it has become sort of a very desirable place to be in the summer. And I'll tell you, my only regret is that is that we can't have a bigger seminar, that we can't have more people. that simply the physical facilities make it impossible to have more people than
But we also never had really any money more than bits and pieces from this and that project. So the only time when we had lavish financing was in 2001.
Yeah.
But ever since, we were working on very, very tiny grants and goodwill of people to come here and cover costs. So it was more like a private enterprise than like a BSF.
Well, that's very much the way the Midwest Seminar went. I think it was a big deal when we got $150 one year. Of which a fair amount actually went for postage. You know, as I said, we had to actually copy things and mail them, and that of course we don't have to do anymore for anything. But
When did you join? Which year?
2008. Wow.
you were in I can remember because if I may embarrass you a little bit, of course. You didn't fit in the bed.
That's been the case ever since.
No matter where we go.
Well, I remember very clearly, that moment. But that was a wonderful seminar, and unfortunately, we can't afford to go back. We were
At that point we had a collaboration with the Romanian Cultural Institute. Yeah, we were funded by the Romanian Cultural Institute.
Yeah.
So
And
we
that's
had
what
two
it
occasions when we had lavish funding. That was the second one.
But yeah, I mean the Midwest Seminar as well, when basically everybody paid their own way, and we all split up dinner, and any questions?